오늘 보여드릴 영상은 테드에서 볼 수 없습니다. 그 컨퍼런스에서 발표된 강연 중 유일하게 게시가 거부된 강연이거든요. 연사는 미카일라 피터슨, 세계적인 심리학자 조던 피터슨의 딸입니다. 그녀는 어렸을 때부터 심각한 자가면역 질환을 앓았고 수십 년의 투병 끝에 고기만 먹는 식단으로 증상을 완화했다고 말합니다. 강연 후 기립박수를 받았지만 테드는 끝내 커뮤니티 가이드라인 위반을 이유로 게시를 거부했습니다. 정확히 어느 부분이 위반인지는 4개월이 넘도록 답을 주지 않았습니다. 비건 식단으로 질병을 치료했다는 강연은 수십 개가 올라와 있는데 이 영상만 막혔습니다. 우리가 어떤 정보에 노출되고 어떤 정보는 차단되는지, 그 기준이 정말 과학적으로 일관된 건지 영상을 보면서 한번 생각해 보시길 바랍니다.
Hey guys, as you may know, I did a TEDx talk in the summer about my experience with the Lion diet, the all-meat diet that put my autoimmune disorder that caused crippling arthritis and gave me 2 joint replacements into remission. I followed TEDx's guidelines very carefully as I'm aware my experience with diet is anecdotal. I finished the talk asking the medical system to look into the diet further. We spent the last 4 months going back and forth with TEDx because they won't post the talk. I was the only talk from that TEDx conference that they refused to post. They said my talk went against their community guidelines, but couldn't name exactly what it went against. And it didn't. Like I said, I was really careful. Since then, Harvard has put out a study on the carnivore diet that I've linked below, showing other people who have also had success putting their diseases into remission. This is something that should be taken seriously and looked into. TEDx is supposed to be a place for new ideas and novel thinking and anecdotal reports. They have tons of vegan talks claiming veganism cures diseases, but my story didn't make it through because it violated community guidelines they can't name. So I decided to put it up here. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Michaela Peterson, and I'm here to talk about how I put my idiopathic autoimmune disorder and mood disorder and chronic fatigue into remission with an extreme elimination diet of only eating meat. But I will start at the beginning. When I was 2, I started walking with my feet out like a duck. And by the time I was in grade 2, I was walking downstairs 1 foot at a time, complaining that my shoes were too small. And I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, active in 37 joints. I was put on methotrexate and naproxen to get my symptoms under control and had cortisone injected into 17 of my joints in grade 2. I was sitting on a chair in class because I couldn't sit on the carpet, because I couldn't sit on my knees or cross my legs. I was using this really ugly fat pencil because I couldn't hold a pencil because I couldn't close my hand. When I was in grade 4, I was put on Enbrel, a biologic immune suppressant, and I started injecting myself with Enbrel and methotrexate twice a week.
잠깐 멈춰볼게요. 엠브렐은 면역 시스템 자체를 강제로 억제하는 생물학적 제제입니다. 성인에게도 독한 약인데 초등학교 4학년 아이가 주 2회씩 스스로 주사를 놓고 있었습니다. 미카일라는 캐나다 최초로 엠브렐을 처방받은 소아 환자였습니다. 검증된 선례도 없이 투여된 거죠. 의료진이 최선을 다했다는 건 압니다. 다만 그 시스템이 식단을 단 한 번도 진지하게 검토하지 않았다는 것을 기억해 두세요.
And I was put into a medically induced remission. And I went on all the sports teams I could go on. I went from being nearly wheelchair bound to playing sports. At the same time, my mental health declined dramatically, and I started experiencing OCD symptoms and suicidal thoughts. And I was put on SSRIs and diagnosed with major depressive disorder, potentially bipolar type 2 with hypomania. When I was in grade 8, I started experiencing the sensations of mosquitoes biting my whole body. And chronic fatigue. And by chronic fatigue, I mean I couldn't wake up and I was falling asleep in class. By the time I was in grade 11, my arthritis had gotten bad enough that it had destroyed all the cartilage in my right hip. And I stopped being able to sleep because of the pain and was put on OxyContin. And when I was 17, I had my hip replaced. While I was healing from my hip replacement, my body destroyed all the cartilage in my left ankle, and I ended up walking on basically broken bones. I went off to university, and my mental health deteriorated further. They tried to stabilize me with Wellbutrin, and I ended up having a grand mal seizure at the university library. They tried to stabilize me with an SNRI, and I was so angry I felt like I could claw my skin off. About a year and a half into university, this gets better, I swear. about a year and a half into university, I was so fatigued that I missed my final exams, and I dropped out and went home. When I got home, I started experiencing a rash on my back and on my bum and then on my face. And when it got to my face, I thought, okay, arthritis is one thing, idiopathic hypersomnia or chronic fatigue is one thing, chronic depression is one thing, but like a rash on my face, I cannot handle that. And I started researching. December 2014, the rash stopped healing. And I went to dermatologist after dermatologist, and they said, you know, stop doing this, you're anxious. And I was like, okay, that's not super helpful. So I figured if I don't figure out what's wrong with me, I'm going to die because my body was destroying its tissues. At that point, I was on Tylenol 3 to take at night because the shoulder pain was so bad from the arthritis that wasn't kept in check that I couldn't sleep. I was taking 40 milligrams of Adderall just to wake up in the morning because of the idiopathic hypersomnia. I was taking 40 milligrams of escitalopram for the depression. I was taking a prescription strength antihistamine because I was so allergic to trees and grass that I was verging on anaphylaxis in the spring. Anyway.
지금 미카일라가 나열한 약들을 보면 코데인 진통제, 아데랄, 나병치료제 다프손, 고용량 항우울제, 면역 억제제, 흡입기, 항히스타민제 이게 동시에 복용하던 목록입니다. 당시 미카일라는 특발성 과다수면증으로 하루 17시간 넘게 자야 했는데 그 졸음을 아데랄로 깨우고 그 부작용을 다시 다른 약으로 막는 구조였습니다. 이 많은 약들은 자연스럽게 받아들이면서 식단을 바꿔보자는 시도는 왜 이렇게 회의적인 걸까요? 이게 오늘 영상의 핵심 질문입니다.
I started researching and I came across this rash eventually called dermatitis herpetiformis, which is the skin manifestation of celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disorder that can be triggered by gluten. And I thought, holy shit, is it celiac disease the whole time? So I cut out gluten. I went off of my immune suppressants, which weren't really working anyway, given the fact I'd lost a hip and an ankle. And I started monitoring my symptoms really closely to look for flare-ups. In September 2015, I reduced my diet further because cutting out gluten wasn't enough, and I thought, if I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, researching, trying to figure out what's wrong with me, I might as well rule out diet. So I went down to meat and greens and certain root vegetables that I didn't really like carrots, sweet potatoes, parsnips. I cut out all the foods that I thought could be potentially causing inflammation, and that month, my skin healed for the first time in a number of years.
처음으로 이 단어에 집중해주세요. 미카일라는 10살 때부터 우울증을 앓았고 수년간 항우울제를 복용했습니다. 그런데 약이 아닌 식단의 변화로 처음으로 우울증이 사라졌다고 말합니다. 아버지 조던 피터슨도 딸의 결과를 보고 함께 식단을 바꿨습니다. 그는 이후 인터뷰에서 이렇게 말했는데요. 23kg이 빠졌고 잇몸 질환이 사라졌으며 불안과 우울이 줄었다. 수면도 줄었는데 오히려 더 맑게 일할 수 있다. 잠깐. 카니보어 다이어트가 정확히 뭔지 짚고 넘어갈게요. 카니보어 다이어트는 동물성 식품만 먹는 식단입니다. 채소, 과일, 곡물을 모두 제외하고 고기, 소금, 물만 먹습니다. 미카일라의 라이온 다이어트는 여기서 좀 더 나아가서 소고기, 양고기 같은 반추동물 고기만 허용합니다. 극단적으로 들리지만 원리는 단순합니다. 자가면역 질환자 중 일부는 특정 음식이 면역 반응을 지속적으로 자극합니다. 모든 음식을 제거한 뒤에 하나씩 다시 추가하면서 원인을 찾아내는 극단적인 제거 식단인 거죠.
I lost 3 pant sizes of bloating I didn't know I had. 2 months into that, my fatigue went away for the first time since grade 8, and I stopped taking Adderall. 3 months into that diet, my depression went away for the first time in my entire life. And I went from living in hell to being in heaven. A hell that I didn't know I'd been living in. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not taking any drugs ever again. And I stopped taking my SSRI over a 2-week period without realizing, because nobody told me, that SSRI withdrawal exists. And for the next 2 years, I had the most horrific experiences of my entire life, and that is saying something. I reintroduced soy a couple of weeks after I went off of SSRIs, and I had a full-blown autoimmune response. And it started with my digestion was upset, my entire body got itchy. The next day, my depression was back worse than I'd ever experienced, and I got into the shower and thought, how could I be so arrogant as to think I could control this disease with diet? And I cried. 4 days later, I had mouth ulcers, my arthritis was back, my rash was back, and I got my brother to drive me home from my parents because I didn't think I could drive. And I got out of the car and I went to my apartment, I turned around, and my brother's head looked like that. For about 2 seconds, he looked at me and he went off, and then it was my brother again. And I thought, oh my God, I just stopped taking all my medication and now I'm insane. So for the next year, I went in and out of what I now know was SSRI withdrawal mixed with an autoimmune disorder and food sensitivities, and I had 24-day-long reactions each time I tried to reintroduce a food. About a year after that, I figured maybe I'll just stop reintroducing foods and not experience this. And at that time, I got pregnant, which I didn't even know I would be able to do given all the medications I'd been on. I went down to Meat and Greens to try and get my symptoms under control. And a year after that, I was breastfeeding, getting out of bed, my wrist buckled. I thought, okay, I have to do something because I'm worried I'm going to drop my baby. The arthritis was back, I was itchy everywhere, and I was like, how is this possible? If I'd experienced remission, why isn't that diet working anymore? And I cut everything out except for beef. And 2 weeks after doing that, thinking I'm nuts and hopefully I don't get vitamin deficiencies, the itch went away and my joints started to feel better. 4 weeks after that, so 6 weeks after an all-beef diet, the depression lifted and I stopped crying in the morning. And 5 months after that, the anxiety lifted and I was back in what I felt was heaven compared to how I'd been living. So that's all beef, all lamb, salt, and water. Now, I've been talking about this diet to spread awareness and in hopes that the medical community can take something like this seriously. My mom went on the diet and her osteoarthritis went away. My dad went on the diet and he lost 70 pounds. His GERDs went away. He had psoriasis. That went away. I've talked to thousands of people with autoimmune disorders who've done similar things and seen similar results. So, that is me now. That is my kid. I'm a CEO. I'm a podcaster. I try to share my experience to get people to see what this kind of diet does for me. I call it the lion diet because it's not cool to be this restricted, and it's not cool to have an autoimmune disorder and people who are sick feel isolated and miserable. So I'm trying to make it cool, but what would be really cool would be if the medical community could take this seriously and do some case studies. That's it.
미카일라 요청은 딱 하나였습니다. 연구를 해달라. 모두가 고기만 먹어야 한다는 주장도 아니고 극단적인 선언도 아닙니다. 비슷한 경험을 한 사람들이 이렇게 많으니 진지하게 한 번만 살펴봐 달라는 겁니다. 그런데 테드는 이 강연을 막았습니다. 그 컨퍼런스에서 기립박수를 받은 그 강연을 말이죠. 어떤 정보가 플랫폼에 올라가고 어떤 정보가 지워지는지, 그 기준이 정말 일관된 과학적 판단인지 아니면 다른 무언가가 작동하는 건지 여러분이 직접 판단해 보시길 바랍니다. 저는 지난 9년간 직접 몸으로 식단을 실험해 왔습니다. 3년간 채식을 하고 3년간 저탄고지 그리고 육식까지 유행하는 식단이라면 몸소 다 겪어봤습니다. 그 과정에서 제가 내린 결론은 하나입니다. 진짜 건강은 겉으로 보기 좋은 몸이 아니라는 것. 소화, 수면, 호르몬, 면역, 정신까지 몸의 모든 기관이 제 기능을 할 때 그때 비로소 내가 가진 잠재력을 100% 꺼낼 수 있다고 믿습니다. 미카일라의 이야기가 저에게 울림이 컸던 것도 그 이유에서입니다. 그녀가 원한 건 날씬한 몸이 아니었어요. 그냥 제대로 기능하는 몸이었을 뿐입니다. 이 채널은 그 가치를 함께 추구하는 공간입니다. 보기 좋은 몸보다 제대로 작동하는 몸에 관심 있으신 분들이라면 구독 버튼을 한번 눌러주세요. 같은 방향을 보는 분들과 함께 하고 싶습니다. 그럼 오늘 영상은 여기서 마무리하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.